like you said, my dad's point of view wasn't even that well represented in the movie. It was just sort of like the other, a little bit. They had a character or two that were supposed to represent that side of it a little bit more. So they had to talk to somebody who knew that side of it.
Well, that's Hollywood for you, right? Don't expect the best from them. Expect the worst. And anything that isn't the worst, yay. Hello, I'm Allan Ruhl from allanruhl.com. I am joined today by Jackie Chea. Jackie Chea is a Texan, an evangelical, a wife, a mother, and a blogger. And she joins me today. How are you, Jackie?
I am great, Allan. Thank you so much for having me on.
Wonderful. So I've just told a bit about you. Is there anything you want to add there that you think my audience should know?
I think you covered the big things that I'm most proud of, but I guess I would just want your audience to know that I have a background in mental health. I have my bachelor's in psychology, master's in counseling. So some of the things I do write about through the mental health lens, but I still focus a lot on politics and religion primarily.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Now, you do have a blog. Just take a minute or two and tell us about your blog. What made you start it?
Sure. Yeah, my blog is Fair and Biased blog, and the name kind of says it all. I definitely have a perspective I'm writing from. I definitely have a bias. I think we all have a bias, and part of my angle in the blog is just to acknowledge that and still try to be fair-minded. So I write as a conservative Christian, and I write on political issues and religious issues through that lens. But I do try to acknowledge always what I find to be the best arguments of the other side and try to be fair in my rebuttal of them. That's sort of what I do with the blog. And I started it about 2 years ago just because I thought we had a need for younger people, and especially younger professional type people, to be weighing in on the conservative side of the spectrum. I think we have the perception sometimes in society that the conservative side is more ignorant, that it's not well reasoned, and I just wanted to combat that with whatever I could.
Yeah, exactly. And to read more about the blog, it's fairandbiased.blog. I'm going to be putting a link in the description. So, go check it out. Go read some of her articles. They're pretty good.
Thank you.
So, Jackie, I know you and your family have a big background in the pro-life movement down there in Texas. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I would love to. We really have been involved in the pro-life movement since my family has long before I was born. And I've been involved in it since I was old enough to understand it. My parents introduced it in an age-appropriate way at different times, but my parents were always involved, and primarily my dad. My dad was Dr. Kenneth Simsick. He passed away in 2008, but prior to his passing, he was so involved in the movement here in Texas. He was the head of the medical ethics committee. He worked at the Army Hospital, William Beaumont, in El Paso, and then at another one here in town. So he was the head of that. He was on radio shows down here. He wrote for Celebrate Life. He wrote for the El Paso Times, Pittsburgh Catholic, all kinds of periodicals and things. And really, his main two things were abortion and euthanasia. So as I was raised, those were things that I sort of imbibed as well. And I started to join in the life chain. The life chain is a thing we have down here that's a lot like the March for Life, but it's been going on since, I don't know, 90s or before. And that's when I started to participate when I was really young. But I have continued to do that after his death. So my husband and I will buy signs, few hundred signs a year, and we'll go pass them out for free because these signs are cheap, but people don't want to buy them, But sometimes people, if you give them that little push, they will participate. So I try to publicize it a little bit, hand out these signs, and then go to the event myself That's one of the things that I continue to do.
Yeah, and that's, well, first of all, like you said, your town. You referred to your town. Do you want to tell everyone where you're from?
Oh, yeah, sorry, we're in San Antonio, Texas. And prior to that, we were in El Paso, and we would do this there as well.
Okay, so the life chain, you think you'd say that's a pretty good way to get started in the pro-life? You don't have to write like fancy articles or read books or anything like that, or do public debate. You know, you just go out there, hold a sign, and...
Exactly. And you're not even supposed to talk at the life chain. You're just supposed to pray. So it's perfect for introverts, extroverts, people that feel very comfortable, people that don't. You do get quite a bit of blowback. I'm not going to lie about that. You know, people get angry, but you're really not supposed to engage. You're just supposed to pray. And I always encourage the loving signs. I know abortion is an issue, is a violent issue, but I like to hold like adoption, the loving option, and things like that. Just or helplines. A lot of times women really need those, so sometimes I'll hold one that has a helpline on it. Another thing that we would do, my dad and I did this without him as well, is a fetal development booth at the Science Expo. So this wasn't even overtly pro-life, it wasn't overtly political, but it was just showing fetal development to all the young students in high school and sometimes university students coming through. And I can't even tell you how many times they didn't even realize what a developing child looked like in the womb.
Yeah, no, and that helps. I've heard of stories of people canceling their abortions once they see the actual visual image, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So, now, Jackie, I brought up you're from Texas. You know, Texas is known to be a pretty traditional place. But what I've concluded, Jackie, is that in North America, South America, Western Europe, pretty much the radical anti-Christian far left has taken control. Now, it may not be as like, for example, in New York and LA and in Toronto up here in Canada and Vancouver, it's very apparent.
Right.
And there's other places it's very apparent as well. But some places, you know, there's some holdouts, you know. Texas is a holdout, you know. You guys are still hanging in there. But you guys are having to go through quite a bit, you know. It's not as holdout, shall we say, as it used to be.
Absolutely. Did you want me to describe a little bit of that battle?
Please do.
Okay, yeah. So you're right. So some people don't realize that Texas was originally a blue state. We were a Democratic state for quite a while. Then, at some point in the relatively modern history, but far enough away that people don't remember it, we flipped red. And it's been a Republican state, Bible Belt, of course, for the last, 20, 30 years. So right now, we're still pretty strongly considered one of those strongholds, but it is starting, they're calling it purple now, it's starting to turn a little bit, or a lot bit. And a lot of that has to do with the cultural shifts that are coming down our way. One of those things that we've seen that I've been discussing with you is this whole new agenda of gender and transgenderism and all this sort of thinking. And one of the things particularly has been this drag queen story time. This started up north, or, you know, in California, these kinds of places. And people had the perception, I think, that we didn't have it bleeding into Texas so much, but we have a lot of things like that in Texas right now. Austin is like the epicenter. Austin is really, really far left, and it's in the public schools in Austin. But what we're starting to see is that it's moving outward, and it's moving into the public libraries now. And my issue with it is the public issue. You know, I'm not sure if you and I totally agree on this, but I take a more libertarian stand on it if it's going to be a private event. I do have a really big problem with it if it's going to be a public event that the government is going to help endorse and pay for. I do not think it should be in public schools. I do not think it should be in public libraries. And that's where a bunch of people started protesting in Leander, Texas, which is very close to Cedar Park, which is where my sister lives. So in Leander, they started trying to have this drag queen story time in the local library. It had been going on in Austin for a while. But that's a little bit more conservative, and it's an area. So what happened is that became highly publicized, and people found out about it, and then the protesters started to form one way or the other. It became this big issue. My sister got involved with the issue, my sister Natalie, when she found out that in Houston, the similar story time had been going into the schools, and one of the drag queens had not been vetted. I don't know really how you vet a drag queen properly. Anyway, but he had not.
I know how to vet them. Send them all away. That's how you vet the drag queens.
I agree with you, because these are nightclub performers. These are performers that are focusing on their sexuality, and it is not a child-appropriate sexuality by any stretch. But what she had found out is that one of these performers had been convicted of a crime of assaulting a young boy. And they didn't find that out for 2 years. He was going into the public schools in Houston and performing. So when my sister found this out is when she got involved in the issue. And when she realized, she started going to the city council meetings, and she realized just how deep it ran, because there was so much anger toward her just for being a mom in the community who said she felt this shouldn't be sanctioned by the public library, that if anything, it should be a private event. People were going after her. People were threatening her online, accusing her of being a danger to children, and making these subtle threats toward her, saying that they felt that she should not be allowed toward children if she was trying to sexualize children by sexualizing this event. It became extreme, especially because when she was speaking at the council meeting, just saying her concerns about this and saying, do we even know, the status of the presenters? People were openly mocking her. They started this campaign online against several of the people that spoke out at city council and against her. So it just became this incredibly angry thing. And then it got really crazy when a coven of witches jumped in, and their claim was that they wanted to make Austin and Texas completely secular. So that's their right to do that, but of course you and I, that's not what we want to see. And they started doing incantations around the library. It was just the craziest thing. So.
Oh, well, where's the holy water when you need it? So
that's funny that you say that, because there were some Messianic Jews blowing ram's horns, I believe, to combat it. It really got dramatic.
Wow. Impressive. Impressed with the Messianic Jews there.
Yes, exactly.
It's a question about Drag Queen Story Hour. You say it started in a liberal part of the country and moved to Texas. Do you know when it started?
You know what? I do not, and I should have checked that before we discussed this. I just know that it didn't start here, that it's only been a little bit more recent here, and we've picked up on it. It's something that's been popular elsewhere for a while, is all I know about it.
So my theory is it's sometime after 2013, because 2013 is when the whole transgender thing becomes mainstream because of the whole Bruce/Caitlyn Jenner thing. He claims to be a woman now, and so now that's the thing. Now they're on TV shows, they're in books. You buy a best-selling novel now. Netflix, it's not so much in the movie theater, but it's getting there.
And I think the people that do these story times, they would make a differentiation between transgender and I don't know what. But I think they would call themselves transvestites, probably, not transgender people. There might be some crossover of people that identify as both, but I know they would make a distinction. But I absolutely agree with you that it started probably close to the gay marriage ruling here, too. Not that it might not have been going on, but it probably became more mainstream.
Huh. Yeah, the gay marriage, that was in 2015, June. Do you remember the day?
I don't remember the day, but I believe that's right.
I can't remember the exact day, but I do remember it missed my birthday by 1 or 2 days. I was so happy it didn't land on my birthday. I'm like, it'll be any day now, don't be on my birthday. And it wasn't.
Oh my goodness.
Like,
Yeah, I don't remember the date. But I do think that the country has changed, and people that are proponents of these things would be happy about that. People that are more religious, like we are, would think that it's, like I said, I allow people to have their own opinions and their own expressions and all of these things, but I don't think it should be forced on religious people, and putting it in our school systems is certainly forcing it on religious people. I don't think this is a neutral issue. And if you wanted to discuss it whenever we're done with Drag Queen Storytime, we talked about it going into the schools, and the sex ed curriculum has been a big issue here in Texas as well.
Yeah. It's June 26th, so one day after my birthday.
Oh, okay.
So tell us a bit about the sex ed in the schools then.
Yeah. So, it really is just an entire worldview that is all interconnected. And in the schools here in Austin, the prevailing idea is that it's healthy and good for the children to learn diversity, and that includes understanding transgenderism and the multiple genders and all of the expressions of sexuality you could possibly have, and they want to start this at the youngest age possible. And I really was shocked, as well as a lot of other people were, when the Austin School District in January, I believe, passed a new curriculum. And in this curriculum, they have a genderbread man. This is like a little gingerbread man for the kids, and he has little pictures drawn all over his body showing you the genital region, the brain, and the pictures of his brain are explaining how he can have different gender ideas, could be different than his sexuality, different than his sex organs. It is way too much for children. I do not know how that got approved, except for the fact that this is Austin and it is mainstream thinking in Austin.
And
but,
remember, all my listeners, this is Texas. This isn't New York. This isn't somewhere in New England or something. This is in Texas, southern Texas.
And they're starting this for third graders. And the genderbread man is the fifth graders, and they make a point to express that sexual attraction and romantic attraction can be different. So they're talking to fifth graders about their sexual attraction. I think that's totally unnecessary, totally inappropriate. When I was in fifth grade, I wasn't thinking about my sexual attraction, and I don't think I should have been. I feel like so many of these things they're doing are not just to teach kids about their bodies or to teach kids about others. They are to push an agenda, to frame their little brains from the time they're very small, that this one way of thinking about sexuality and gender is the way to think and the only way to be open-minded and accepting, the only way to understand sexuality. The one thing I will say is that parents can opt out, and that's the saving grace of it, but I can't imagine how much advertising there even is for it in the school that the child wouldn't be able to avoid during those weeks.
Genderbread man.
Yeah.
Lord have mercy. Oh man, that's scary stuff.
It's pretty extreme.
And so I take it your child will be opting out.
Well, I'm in San Antonio, so that curriculum has not come to my area yet, and that's part of what we're talking about, the spread. That is something that, like, the parents in Austin are having to deal with. The parents in San Antonio are not yet having to deal with, but it's obviously a matter of time. Austin and San Antonio almost touch now. They've grown so much, both cities. So,
what's the, I'm not familiar with the geography of Texas, but by car, how long does it take to drive from San Antonio to Austin?
About an hour and a half, give or take.
Okay, so Calgary to Red Deer. Okay.
But that's more like center to center. So if you're on the outskirts, it won't take you nearly as long.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so they're not too far away. They're
right.
They're neighbors, because Texas is a large state.
Yeah, they're neighbors.
Now, in terms of apart from Austin, the three biggest cities are Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. Of course, Fort Worth and Arlington are essentially suburbs of Dallas.
Right.
So, of those three cities, what is the best and what's the worst?
Ooh, I I think that's hard. I would still say that I think, and we're talking the best and worst from a conservative religious standpoint, right?
Yeah,
I
in
would
terms of the
I would
stuff that's going
say
on.
all of those are now liberal-minded cities, but my city, San Antonio, I still think is probably the most equal. That's just my perception of it. I know that Austin is probably the furthest left. Houston also pretty extreme, and Dallas. They're really all now very like pretty much all the council members, all the Congress people from those districts are from the left, or predominantly, I should say. We do have some conservatives representing us, but I'd say San Antonio is still the holdout. But San Antonio has a lot of issues going on, so it's by no means a conservative city. It's a liberal city in general. I mean, we have Julian Castro's from here. He was our mayor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was, and you told me a bit about your current mayor or someone who's running for mayor, or
No, he's the current mayor. It's Ron Nierenberg.
okay.
Yeah, he is the current mayor and just got reelected. I did not vote for him in this recent election, but so the thing about him, he's a shady one. He's pretty far left, and he votes consistently and supports policies that are very far left, but he always finds a way to sort of try to disassociate himself from it after the fact. For example, he just voted to ban Chick-fil-A from our airport, and succeeded. They banned Chick-fil-A from our airport. And the thing was that Chick-fil-A was supposed to be antagonistic to LGBT community, which I think that that's a spurious claim. I don't think that that's true, but they're basing that on their donation patterns, right? And they want to control who Chick-fil-A donates to, and that one statement made by Dan Cathy, who's their founder, who believes in traditional marriage. So the man's not allowed to have a belief about marriage and still have his restaurants in the San Antonio airport anymore, if he's open about that belief and it doesn't line up with Ron Nierenberg's idea. So what he did, he voted to keep it out of the airport, but then he did what he always does, and he said, oh, well, it had nothing to do with that issue, although we had council members admitting that it had everything to do with that issue. But he said, it's really just a business decision because they don't open on Sundays, and we want business in the airport 7 days of the week. So that's what he always does. He pushes these very far left ideas, and then he almost always ties it to some economic thing and says, oh, it was just in the interest of the city, but that's clearly not his agenda, and a lot of people admitted that wasn't.
Come on, at least have some conviction here. You're going to be a raging
That's
leftist.
my thing.
Just say you're a raging leftist. Yeah, they go against my views. I'm honest.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we have a council member who said that, and he was very straightforward about his reasoning, and that he thought, Chick-fil-A was awful and not inclusive. He didn't want it in our airport. He thought it would make people feel scared when they got off the plane, which was really extreme. But at least he was saying what he thought. Ron kind of always tries to play both sides and have his cake and eat it too. So I really don't respect him for much.
Pretty depressing. Story. There's no Chick-fil-A in Calgary here, but we did used to have one in the airport. Now it's gone. I don't know if you saw what happened in Toronto when they tried to open up a Chick-fil-A there. If my viewers want to know, type that into YouTube, Chick-fil-A Toronto, and see what happened. It's not pretty. So, what's the church attendance rates in San Antonio and Texas in general?
I think we still have a higher church attendance rate than most places. We are part of the Bible Belt. We have a strong evangelical community. And we have a large Catholic community, and a lot of that has to do with the Hispanic population here. Of course, all ethnicities are represented, but a lot of the Hispanic population would identify as Catholic. And there are many Catholic churches, many Protestant churches. We have some of the biggest churches in the nation here. We have one here in San Antonio, CBC Community Bible Church. We also have a giant one in Dallas. We have a lot. It's still a pretty religious area.
Yeah, I think I can't name the city, but Pastor Jeffress or Jeffers. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think he's somewhere out of Texas, right?
I don't actually recognize him, but I'm sure he is probably a big one. Another one, Pastor Hagee, is here in our town. He's Cornerstone Church. He's kind of a televangelist. You may have seen him or heard of him.
Yes, I've I'm pretty familiar with Hagee.
Yeah.
Interesting character. His son too. Is his son part of
that
Matt
church
as well? Yeah.
He's pretty much taking over now that his father is getting on the older side.
Yeah, he's like just look. He looks like almost exactly like his father. It's weird, Scary.
It worked out pretty nicely. They have a little bit of a dynasty, and I think that it was pretty seamless to just pass it on since they look and sound so much alike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned once that you saw Ravi Zacharias speak at not too long ago.
Cornerstone.
Oh, Cornerstone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was at Cornerstone. I'm not. I don't attend that church. Pastor Hagee, I don't see eye to eye on with him on everything, but I will say about his church, they are fantastic for bringing in speakers and evangelists and things and just letting them speak. And Ravi Zacharias is one of my absolute favorite evangelists, and he was speaking. It was a free event. Like most of their events are just free there, and thousands of people come. It was very, very fun to go see him in person, and that was a great opportunity to me. Cornerstone does a lot of those things, so I will give him credit for that.
Wow, yeah. See, in Calgary, we don't get those kind of speakers here too often, Where it's a pretty dry well up here when it comes to religion. So.
Well, I see when you say that seems foreign to me because that's so normal for us down here. So I guess in that sense we are very religious and religious minded. It's not at all odd to see that kind of thing and to hear people saying they're going to hear these people speak. A lot of times people say, "What church do you attend?" As if the expectation is that you do attend a church. So, of course, many people don't, but many people do.
Okay, and is San Antonio, would you say, was the most religious city in Texas, or?
I think that one would be hard to say. I think all the big cities are not going to be as religious, honestly, as the smaller towns and things. The suburbs more, and then the rural areas the most full. Those are the most religious areas in Texas. If you go out to cowboy country, which would be like around any of the major cities, those areas are very religious. All the rodeos, they'll pray at the rodeo, and often before and after. They're very patriotic as well. And the cowboys will all be crossing themselves before they get on the bulls, and that those people tend to be the most religious. The big cities, I would say, we have a lot of churches, but it's not even as common here in the cities.
Oh, so are I assume that they're Catholic cowboys? You said they cross themselves.
I think it's a mix. Sometimes you'll just see them bow their head or pray. The ones that cross themselves, they must be Catholic. Yeah.
Okay. So now, have you touched on any of these issues on your blog lately? Look like anything people can go read specifically?
Yeah, I touched recently on the drag queen story time, which we talked about, and I found out so much more after the fact, after I wrote that I wish I could have included. For example, found out that another one of these drag queens, Miss Kitty Litter, that was up in the area I wrote about, Leander, ended up having a record for prostitution. Not only did he end up having a record for prostitution, but he had apparently told the librarian that he had a record. And the librarian ignored it and chose to have him come and talk to the kids anyway.
What part of, how far from San Antonio is Leander? I have not heard of that.
Leander's right above Austin, so 2 hours, 2.5.
Oh, okay. So not too far, but closer to Austin.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I write relatively often on the abortion issue, and we have had a lot of things going on with that down here too. as I think is happening all over the country.
So talk a bit about that. What you said about the pro-abortion curriculum. I think in Austin.
Oh, right. Okay, this curriculum we were talking about with the school district. So one example of how Texas is more conservative and still is more conservative is we recently passed a law saying that our school sexual education curriculums could not come from abortion providers. You wouldn't think that that would necessarily be a conservative standpoint, but in this day and age it is. So that was sort of a big thing to pass that, and some people were really angry about it. Well, this Austin school district, it didn't sit well with them, and the first curriculum they tried to pass through was actually written by Planned Parenthood. When they went forward to get that approved, and can you imagine that, Planned Parenthood writing the curriculum for third graders? When they went to pass that through, it didn't go through because it was violating that law. So what they did is they went to Alberta Health Services up in your neck of the woods and started talking to them about getting their sexual education curriculum. Now, apparently, I'm not so familiar with them, but apparently they also provide abortions, so they still violated the law to try to get the curriculum from the Alberta services. What happened, the school district was so insidious, for lack of a better word, they talked to Alberta Health Services, which told them they're happy to give them the curriculum, but they need them to sign some paperwork, agree to the curriculum, check off a few things. Our Austin school district just nodded basically and was like, great, thank you, we'll get back in touch. They never got back in touch. They used the curriculum. They actually changed the curriculum a little bit. And they did all of this without signing off, without going through the proper channels, presumably to try to go under the radar of this law. So it was just outright deceptive. They still used a curriculum from an abortion provider, but not only did they deceive the state and their district, they deceived Alberta Health Services. And when they found out, they were angry. It's something that's going on right now. A conservative group exposed this through just asking for records, open records laws, and finding the original communications with the health services and realizing that the communications didn't continue on paper, but that the curriculum still went through. So then when they pieced all this together, they found out what they had done, and now everyone's mad at this school district.
That's really good investigative journalism. I don't know if that was journalism.
It really is.
Good investigation. You know, that's like, I don't know if you've seen Spotlight, impressive investigation reporting.
I love it.
You brought up Planned Parenthood. Have you seen the movie Unplanned?
I haven't seen that yet, believe it or not.
Oh.
But I've heard that it was really, really powerful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I thought it was pretty powerful. It's, like Employee of the Year, and talk about turning your life around. That just shows anyone can take a step in the right direction. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And
that the human conscience really is not dead, despite what you do to it. It can be reawakened.
Mm-hmm.
That was impressive.
Yeah. Now, what do you think? Because there's obviously some problems here. These pro-abortion curriculums, the drag queen story hour, and other dangerous treads. Are there things to be optimistic about down in Texas?
So this is something that I was thinking about before we were going to talk. There are things to be optimistic about, but the hard thing is that it's like Texas has, as you say, been a stronghold for such a long time that the trend is going downward on these moral issues from a religious standpoint. So it's like the overall impression is not necessarily super optimistic, but do we have wonderful things going for us? Yes. A few of those things, we still have some really good representatives. Our Governor Abbott, really strong, religious conservative. Dan Crenshaw, he's one of our representatives. Some of your viewers may have seen him with the eye patch. He's been in the news lately. He's fantastic. We have a lot of grassroots people, and we're still a conservative state. We still have really good representation. We're still a religious state. You still can find people everywhere talking about these issues openly and loudly on either side of it in a coffee shop or a restaurant, and they won't feel like they're not allowed to say it in most places. Like I can go to a restaurant and I can hear people in this booth speaking about liberal things and people in this booth talking about conservative things, and I know that's not the case everywhere.
So
another good thing. Oh, please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, is that the same for Austin as well?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the same for Austin as well. Ugh. I visit Austin quite a bit because my sister does live in Cedar Park, and wow, I never hear a conservative thing coming out of Austin. When you get out to the suburbs, it's different, but in the actual city, it's actually pretty shocking, and it's just one mind frame, and it's about as the whole phrase "keep Austin weird." It really, I don't know if you've heard that, but that's the city's catchphrase, "keep Austin weird," and they really take that to heart. And part of that weirdness is just an extreme left agenda. So Austin is really as bad as anywhere in the country, probably Portland, Oregon, most parts of California. Austin's no different, or in some cases maybe more extreme. But most of the places in Texas are not like that. We do have that going for us. And I was discussing this with my sister before we did this interview, and I asked her that question. I said, what do you think? What do we have going for us? And she said, one thing I can tell you is that when all of this stuff was going on with the drag queens and her being so aggressively pursued and accused of these things, what happened is that so many of these conservatives who had been silent found each other, and they formed the first official conservative political group in Cedar Park, and that group is now having a voice, and it's actually taking political action. So that's something that's coming out of this. I think the left is becoming so aggressive and so extreme that we're starting to see people fight back a little bit louder. This is obviously a conservative state, so fighting back sounds funny, but I think conservatives are more silent. They're not having that same matched passion that you'll see from the left. So because that's been amped up, honestly, after Donald Trump was elected, we've seen way more than we saw previously in the anger department and the violence department. I think people are starting to galvanize a little bit better and share their voices as well. And you feel that it's a little bit more palpable than it was previously. Well, I think that's going for it.
You said the conservative, more traditional people are less, we seem less active. I think that's because, I think you'd agree with this, that we don't spend our time trying to change everything. We just want to get along with our life, take our families to church, and
right,
and pray and study our faith and stuff like that. Live our faith, like politics and changing society to mold it. That's not really something we think about, right? You know what? And when we do, it's more the bottom up, not the top down.
I think that's exactly right. It's like the things that I'm discussing right now. It's like a lot of what we do is saying we want our right to free speech. We want our right not to have certain views pushed on our children. We're sort of from a more defensive point of view, like you're saying, rather than this offensive onslaught that you'll sometimes see coming out of the left.
Just one more question about Texas. You talked about a few politicians. Is Rick Perry involved in politics anymore?
I don't hear much about him lately. The last I heard about him is, when he was running for some other offices, but he was the governor here for such a long time, and he was a good one. I don't think he's particularly active right now, but I do expect him to pop up again sometime soon. I don't think he's done. I think he's just taking a little hiatus.
Nice. So let's leave the state of Texas for a while and go on to the national thing. Now,
sure.
Of course, you guys have an election coming up in toward the end of 2012. Trump's going to try to get his second term. It looks like Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. Looks like it's not a shoo-in, but it's leaning that way. And do you have any thoughts of the upcoming and the faith issues involved in this upcoming election?
Right. Well, I think the biggest faith issue that is always at the forefront for me is abortion. The marriage issue is already decided. So really at that point, it's just how much is going to be, it's a religious freedom issue, you know, how much people are allowed to speak out for their own point of view or not. The main issues, I think, Biden versus Trump, yeah, it's going to be the abortion thing. It's going to be the freedom of speech / religious freedom. It's going to be immigration and gun control, which are less of the religious issues as you and I have discussed, but they do cross over when you're talking about issues of compassion and personal rights and all those things. Those are going to be the big ones, I think. And then, of course, you've got the healthcare on the table, which is not as much of it has moral implications again, but it's not one of those religious moral issues per se.
Yeah, and I think it's Justice Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. You know, she's aging there, right? And so there's a chance that in the next term that there might be, possibly even before the election, but certainly in the next 4 years, she'll have there's going to be an opportunity to put a new justice on the bench.
This is the number one thing to a lot of faith-based people. When I voted in 2016 for Donald Trump, I really struggled with that vote, as I've shared before, just because of some of the things he said and choices he's made before. But really one of my deciding factors, and a lot of evangelicals' deciding factor, was going to be the Supreme Court, and that was primarily for the abortion issue. 2 justices he's already appointed. So for the left, this is like the end of the world. And for the right, this is like, oh my goodness, thank goodness. We put him in office and he actually followed through with what he said. But we've got several judges that are at retirement age, not just Justice Ginsburg, but she is unwell. She's not been well for a long time. She's had long periods of being off the court. She's struggled with cancer. She said that she's not going to retire, while she has the chance if Trump's in office, but she may not have a choice in that. I do not remember her exact age, but she is really getting up there, and she has really not been well. And if we're looking at, the rest of this year and 4 more years, it's hard to imagine she would remain on the court the whole rest of that time. So that would be at least 1 seat, maybe more. And we might see 1 or 2 of the conservative justices step down in order to allow the president to appoint for their slot. So it's really, really big for people that want to see the court make some of these decisions that would be more in line with their faith.
Yeah, and like I think if you're a religious person, like pretty much all other issues are secondary. I'm not saying they're not important, but I mean, and of course, right. Yes, Trump has personal moral failings that we can't ignore, but at the same time, we have to remember we're not voting for a pastor, a bishop, or a pope. We're voting for a politician who is called to do the right thing in cases like appointing the right people to the Supreme Court, which he's 2 for 2, and the third one's probably going to be Amy Coney Barrett, who's just as good as
that's what he said.
The first 2, if not better, like really good.
I think better. Yeah, I think better.
Well, yeah, no, I'm so from where we stand right now, it's March. It's still a ways off, and things could obviously change between now and then. But are you confident with Trump staying in office?
No, I'm not. I think if I had to bet on it in Las Vegas, I would bet that he would win, because I do think that he's been successful in a variety of ways. But I couldn't say I'm confident because it was such.
Okay, I'm going to resume. Some technical difficulties. I apologize for that. So we were talking about how the last election was so close with Clinton, and so just follow up on that.
Pick up from there. Sure. All I was saying about that is that the last election was so close, but I do feel that this election will go in favor of Trump if I had to guess, because he's kept his promises to the people. The economy's so good, And he's particularly kept his promises to people that put him in office, the conservatives and the Christian movement in America, I should say, the conservative Christian movement. The things that he promised on abortion and religious freedom issues, things like that, he has followed through, putting people in the Supreme Court that would honor those values. He's done that too. So I think most of those people, he's going to get their vote again. I think he's going to get a few more votes from people who just are pleased with the economy, maybe moderates or independents, people in the middle. So I think it's in his favor, but I think it's going to be very, very close. We just had this primary in Michigan, and Joe Biden came out ahead of Bernie Sanders, whereas Bernie beat Hillary in Michigan in 2016. So that means that Biden's doing better than Hillary did in Michigan at the same time 4 years ago. So I don't know if that means Biden has a little bit of advantage. We'll see. I'm definitely not sure that Trump will win.
Because I remember there were about 3 or 4 states that Trump just squeaked by, like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And a couple
I think
others. Michigan, and a couple others. I don't know all of them offhand, but I mean, if just one of those didn't go his way, we'd have more Elena Kagans on the Supreme Court,
Absolutely, and that's why I'm saying it's going to be close. Florida, he just barely won. I mean, he needs all those states again, or he needs to get one he didn't get last time. But it was so difficult. I felt like he didn't have a path to the presidency the first time, and everybody kept saying he didn't have a path. I was fully mentally prepared for him to lose. I was already ready to, congratulate all my liberal friends on their win the next day. I was in shock. A lot of my friends and relatives woke up the next morning and they'd gone to bed before the results came in, and they just could not believe it. I stayed up till like 4 a.m. watching it, but a lot of people could not believe it.
My friend Cam, who I've had on, and of course you know about, I was talking to him on the phone the day before the election, and I said, what do you think are the odds? And he said, I'd say there's about 60% chance Clinton wins, but it's by no means a runaway. And,
right.
And was that your sentiment?
I thought it was higher than that. I just really thought it was a completely losing battle. I was voting because I think it's right to vote, and that you have to put your voice out there, and I didn't want Texas to go blue, so I did all those things, but I had no expectation that Trump was going to get the presidency, because everyone told me that he couldn't. All of the news organizations and the polls were strongly against him, and the narrative at that time was that no one liked him, no one was going to vote for him, only the most extreme, crazy people would vote for him. So I think a lot of people internalized that, me included. I a little bit believed that he didn't have any support, but obviously he did.
Well, that just means, if you're in a battleground state, you have to work that much harder, just volunteering. If anything else, just look past all of it for the pro-life stuff, for the possibility of more justice.
Right. And that's what I did. That's what a lot of people like me did. And I think that's a huge part of the reason he was in office.
Now, Jackie, last question, then we'll wrap it up. Eventually, maybe not later this year, but eventually, maybe 2024, eventually someone like, maybe not Bernie Sanders, but someone like Bernie Sanders is going to get back into power. So us as Christians, if you're a Christian in Texas or in Idaho, name the state, wherever, what is our job to do? Because eventually they're going to get back in.
Yeah. I think our primary job is just not to be silent. We need to speak out. We need to write. We need to do things like this that you and I are doing right now. I think it's when we're silent that these things take hold, even though there's always going to be fact. There are always going to be two sides to it, and that's healthy to some extent. But the unhealthy thing is when we're no longer allowed to have a voice, and I think that's how a lot of religious people see the trend and what we're afraid of. So I think we need to continue to have that voice. and not allow ourselves to be shut up, not allow people to tell us that our point of view is not valid and that we're not allowed to vote based on our values, even our religious values. And obviously, Christian people can pray. I think we actually believe in the power of prayer. So we will continue to do that, pray for our leaders, pray for the process, actually use our right to vote and our right to speak, and continue to get our ideas out there. That's what I think.
Fairandbiased.blog, everyone. Go there, read what she has to say. Jackie Chea, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Allan. It was a pleasure.
All right, God bless.
You too.